Hey everyone, this is Neo once again from the Overclocker magazine. Today I'm here to talk to you about the ASRock B650E Steel Legend. Now I am a fan of Steel Legend motherboards. I've always been a fan of these motherboards. I think they're cost effective and they offer everything that you generally need in a motherboard without all the frills and all of that stuff. So if you're going to think of a bare bones motherboard, but one that doesn't suck completely, Steel Legend is the one for me. I was hoping that this motherboard would follow in those footsteps, but given the chipset that it's using, it's perhaps not possible, and as a result, this motherboard costs as much as it does. And how much is that cost? $6,600, around there at Wootware, and in US dollar terms on Amazon, it was $363. So when we talk about $363, you're thinking that's a lot of money to pay for a B650E motherboard, particularly a Steel Legend, and it is, because the Strix F on Amazon is $294. In SA, we actually had the same pricing conundrum as well, because a few months ago, Wootware had the Strix F for about $6,000 or $5,900 or some ridiculous amount of money, and then this one was $6,000 something. So you can obviously tell it's going to be very difficult to convince anybody or to tell anybody to go with the Steel Legend over a Strix F. But fortunately, we don't have the situation anymore. Like I said to you, the motherboard is $6,600. And for $6,600, you're not going to find a cheaper B650E motherboard. So what does that mean to you? Well, it means that this motherboard has a particular set of features that make it worthwhile and worth your time. And I'll go through those features with you right now. So let's start from the rear I/O. So you're going to get 4 USB 5 gigabits per second ports. Then you're going to get 2 10 gigabits per second ports. I wish it was at least 3, but sadly that's not the case. But fortunately, one of them is a USB Type-C port. The other 2 ports that you get are regular USB 2.0 for your keyboard and mouse and that sort of thing. But what you see here as well is the antenna for Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.2. Already, just that on its own makes this worth your while, because it has everything that you are likely going to need to connect to everything. When we talk about the LAN, it's a 2.5G Dragon LAN. It's a Realtek controller, but they call it Dragon for whatever reason. When it comes to audio output, unfortunately, you're only going to get 2 analog audio outputs and a digital one, a la Gigabyte style. So what else do you get on this motherboard? Here's an interesting thing. You actually get 2 USB 3.0 headers. So these are 5 gigabits per second ports, right? Or headers at least. You can actually use all 4 USB 3.0 ports on the front I/O, in addition to the USB Type-C port that you get from the front I/O, and this motherboard of course has that as well. So this motherboard for me is rather interesting because it has things that you would expect on a high-end board, but things that you would appreciate on a low-end board that it doesn't have as well. For instance, you're going to get some shielding for your memory. Why do you need that for memory? Unless you have memory that weighs like a kilogram a stick, there's really no need for that. But you also get shielding on the graphics card on the PCI Express slot, which you are going to need these days because graphics cards weigh as much as small children. So that one I can justify, but for the memory, I'm really not sure why it's there. However, it does help to the aesthetic element of this motherboard, and it does help it stand out a little bit. So when we talk further about aesthetics, there's a little bit of RGB that you get on this motherboard. You get it on the north side near the rear I/O, right? So there's a little light there that is programmable. Of course, you can get it to do all sorts of fancy things like that. I generally kept it blue and I kept it like that, as you can see in the video right now. And then you also get a light by the South Bridge, or rather by the chipset. It's not something to write home about. It's the most simplistic and the most basic implementation of RGB, but it is there. And talking further about RGB, you also get RGB or addressable RGB headers as well on the motherboard, with the typical other headers that you get as well. So in terms of lighting and so forth, I think they've got you covered there. It's not going to be as comprehensive as you get on a Tai Chi or on a Phantom Gaming, but I think what we get here for the price is more than adequate. So there are 3 M.2 sockets here. I was expecting 4, but they do generally have 3. One is obviously Gen 5 and the other 2 are Gen 4. So the Gen 5 SSD socket, or rather M.2 SSD socket, has a beefy heatsink on it. It's pretty substantial, and I think it will do the job. I'm not sure because I haven't tried any SSDs that are Gen 5, but I think it should be able to do the job. However, for the other 2, the heatsink they have on there, I'm not so sure. Hey, it's so flimsy. It just feels so thin. I'm really not sure that it'll be able to cool your SSDs adequately, particularly given that if you install a high-end graphics card on this, it's likely going to run up just against where the M.2 SSDs are, the Gen 4 ones at least. And the heat that's coming for your graphics card is only going to make your drives run really hot. So I might be cautious about putting high performance Gen 4 SSDs in that socket. If you have one, rather use the Gen 5 socket because it just has a better heatsink there. In terms of additional storage, unfortunately this motherboard comes with only 2 sockets instead of 4 that you become accustomed to. The QVL on the motherboard says that the board supports up to DDR5 6400, but lo and behold, I couldn't get anything higher than 6000 working reliably. And I did try. I tried 66, 62, 6400. 6200 did post, but it was unstable. So 6000 is where I ended up. When it comes to performance, it performs exactly like what you would expect any other B650E motherboard performs. So there's really no difference there. But I would like to say that I would have appreciated better DRAM overclocking. Not that it matters as well, because again, it is an AMD platform and 6000 is where sweet spot is going to be. So when it comes to the BIOS, which is probably one of my favorite things about using ASRock motherboards, it's just so easy to use. This one isn't as detailed as you would get on an Aqua board or a Tai-Chi, but for what it is, it's simply laid out, everything makes sense, and it's so easy to navigate. I still think today it is the smoothest motherboard BIOS I've come across. Yes, all others have upgraded themselves and you can pretty much do everything that you want to do as and when you need to, but the ASRock one still remains the smoothest and the simplest BIOS interfaces that I've come across, and I will admit that I am partial to this sort of interface. So now that we've dealt with that, let's talk about the software. The software is, again, A-tuning. It is a basic program and it is something that you expect to get on a motherboard. You also have your fan tuning software. You also have your RGB software as well. So all of these things work the way you expect them to. ASRock hasn't changed much here. And in fact, I would think that they're due for a sort of upgrade to make the software a bit better. But as it is, I have no qualms with it. It is very simplistic. It is basic, but it does do the job and gets everything done as you would want it to. So what is it about this motherboard that makes it worth your while? Well, it's just a combination of features. But in as far as value for money goes, it's going to be very difficult to beat this one because, as I said, it is the cheapest B650E motherboard that you can buy in the country. And for that, you have to give it up for ASRock for providing this. So with that said, you guys let me know what you think of this motherboard. Do you think it's worth your time? Do you think visually it's attractive to you? Do you think spending this kind of money on a B650E motherboard is warranted? Let me know in the comments below. And until the next time, remember to share, like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the flip side. So take care and peace.